No one could tame the wild bull until a paralyzed teen raised his hand. The metal gates clanged like war drums, and the air trembled with every violent thud of hooves striking steel. Revenant was in the chute, and the sound of him crashing into the bars had silenced even the rowdiest of rodeo fans. The sun beat down hard on the packed dirt arena, baking the earth until it cracked beneath boots and hooves. Dust hung in the air like a curtain, catching the golden light and swirling around the wide wooden stands of the Crow Ridge Arena. All eyes were fixed on the chute, except for one pair, deep blue and steady, watching from the shadows beneath the bleachers. Wyatt Knox sat in his wheelchair beneath a low shade, arms resting on the padded wheels, back straight, unmoving. He didn't blink as the bull let out another guttural roar. Revenant, 800 pounds of raw, bone-breaking power, was the kind of beast they only whispered about in locker rooms and cowboy bars. Mean, unpredictable, undefeated. Today, 6 riders had already tried. 6 had already failed. The announcer's voice cracked over the loudspeaker. "We got one more brave soul up next. Let's see if luck'll finally change." Wyatt didn't move. His fingers tightened slightly over the chair arms, but that was the only sign that anything inside him stirred. He wasn't here for the show. He was here for him, Revenant. The last rider, a stocky man with thick arms and a trembling lip, mounted the bull like he was getting on a grenade. Wyatt's gaze never left the animal's eyes. There was something in them. Wild, yes, but also haunted. Revenant bucked so violently that the rider barely lasted 2 seconds. The crowd gasped as the man was launched high and slammed hard into the dirt, where he lay groaning, breathless and stunned. Revenant didn't run off. He stomped and kicked the empty air, foam flying from his mouth, eyes wide and white with rage. A few people laughed. Some clapped. A few winced. But Wyatt just stared, his jaw clenched. "Another one down," muttered a voice beside him. It was Hank Knox, his father, arms folded tight across his chest, sweat streaking the lines of his sun-worn face. "Ain't nobody gonna ride that devil. Ain't meant to be tamed." Wyatt didn't answer. He kept his eyes on the bull, watching the way its shoulders moved, the pattern in its stomps, the twitch in its ears. He was memorizing it all. "You don't need to be around this kind of thing, son," Hank said more softly now. He stepped in front of the wheelchair, casting a long shadow. "You got your own battles. No point staring at what you can't do no more." Wyatt slowly looked up at him. His face was calm, unreadable. "I'm not staring at what I can't do," he said quietly. "I'm staring at what nobody else understands." Hank's lips tightened. He knew that tone. He'd heard it when Wyatt was 10 and insisted on training the wild horse nobody could saddle. He heard it again when Wyatt, at 13, broke rodeo records with quiet confidence and unshakable instincts. But since the crash, the fire had gone. Or at least, that's what Hank thought. "Don't get ideas," Hank warned, patting his son's shoulder roughly. "Not about this." The ambulance rolled out of the arena with the injured rider groaning in the back. Revenant was pulled toward the pens, still thrashing but slowly losing steam. The announcer closed out the day's event with a half-hearted joke, and the crowd began to disperse. Wyatt wheeled himself away from his father and toward the holding area. He moved quietly, blending with the shadows of the corrals and the creaking wooden gates. Nobody paid much attention. Why would they? He couldn't walk, couldn't ride, couldn't matter, not anymore. But he mattered to someone. Eli Danner, the gangly 15-year-old stable hand who had always looked up to Wyatt like a local legend, appeared at his side holding a bucket of feed. "You're not supposed to be back here," Eli whispered with a nervous smile. "Jace'll lose it if he sees you near Revenant." Wyatt's eyes flicked toward the far pen where the bull was now pacing, huffing through flared nostrils, ropes still dangling from his shoulders. "Jace can yell all he wants. I'm not here to touch him." Eli hesitated, then followed Wyatt as he approached the edge of the pen. Revenant froze. His eyes locked onto the boy in the chair, muscles tensing, hooves stamping the ground. But then, he didn't charge. Wyatt raised a hand, palm out, slowly, deliberately. And Revenant stopped. He didn't move forward, didn't back away. Just stared. "He didn't move," Eli whispered, stunned. "You see that?" Wyatt nodded once, his throat dry. "He's not angry. He's scared. Eli blinked. Scared? That thing almost killed a guy 5 minutes ago. He's not trying to hurt anyone, Wyatt said, eyes still fixed on the bull. He's trying to keep everyone away. The shadows lengthened as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Wyatt sat there, motionless, as the handlers came to take Revenant to the far paddock. The bull followed, calmly, eyes never leaving Wyatt until the last gate shut. That night, long after the crowd was gone and the arena lights dimmed, Wyatt lay awake in his room, staring at the cracked ceiling. Outside the window, coyotes howled in the distance, but his thoughts were on Revenant, the wild fury, the fear, the restraint. He remembered that same look in the mirror 2 years ago, when he first woke up in the hospital bed and couldn't move his legs. When the nurses said the word permanent and his father tried not to cry. He'd wanted to fight, scream, destroy, but all he did was shut down, just like Revenant. The next morning, Wyatt wheeled himself to the edge of the pasture before sunrise. Horses roamed quietly in the distance, steam rising off their backs in the cold dawn. He spotted Revenant in the far enclosure, still pacing, still restless. Wyatt leaned forward slightly, whispering to no one. "I know what you're feeling. You don't belong in cages, do you?" He didn't expect an answer, but he saw the bull pause again, saw him raise his head toward the fence line. Later that afternoon, Wyatt returned to the arena stands, just as the handlers were inspecting the pen gates. Jace Rimmer, broad-shouldered and loud as a thunderclap, leaned on the fence drinking a soda, chewing on a toothpick. "Look who's back," Jace chuckled, walking toward Wyatt. "You here to do commentary now? Or you just missed the smell of hay and humiliation?" Wyatt didn't respond. His silence always seemed to irritate men like Jace. "I get it," Jace continued, voice mocking. "You used to be somebody. Now you're not. Life's tough, huh?" Wyatt slowly turned his chair toward him. "He's not out of control," he said simply. "You are." Jace blinked, caught off guard by the directness. "You talking about me?" "You don't understand that bull," Wyatt said. "You scare him, you provoke him, then you punish him when he fights back." Jace leaned in, tone dropping to something cold. "Don't go pretending you're a whisperer just because he didn't trample you yet. That animal's broken." Wyatt's jaw clenched. He's just never been seen for what he is." Jace scoffed and turned away, shouting to the handlers to double-lock Revenant's gate. Wyatt watched him go, but his mind was already far ahead. He could feel it in his bones, in the rising certainty behind his ribs. There was something between him and Revenant, something no one else saw. Not his father, not the rodeo crowd, not even Jace. And that was why, that night, when the world was quiet again, and the sky full of stars, Wyatt wheeled himself to the holding pen and waited. He didn't try to touch the bull. He didn't even speak. He just raised his hand once more. And once again, Revenant didn't move. "He's not angry. He's scared." "Back away slow," Wyatt whispered, gripping the wheels of his chair as Revenant crept forward in the dim light of the barn. Eli stood just a few feet behind him, frozen with a handful of hay still clutched in one hand. The wooden slats of the pen separated the bull from them, but tonight, Revenant had moved closer than ever before, calm, alert, but not aggressive. His chest rose and fell in slow rhythm, steam curling from his nostrils in the cool night air. Wyatt kept his voice low and steady. "Easy. It's just me." The bull took one more step, lowering his head slightly toward Wyatt's outstretched hand through the pen gate. The silence was so deep, Eli could hear his own heartbeat. And then, Revenant stopped, inches away, watching him. Wyatt didn't flinch. He didn't blink. Slowly, he reached out further until his fingers brushed the thick, bristled fur of the bull's muzzle. Eli gasped. "He's letting you touch him." Revenant stood still. Wyatt's hand trembled slightly, but not from fear. It was awe. This moment, this tiny moment, was something no rodeo cowboy, no seasoned trainer, had managed. And Wyatt had done it without a whip, without shouting, without trying to break the bull. He had earned it. But behind them, footsteps scraped against gravel. "What in blazes do you think you're doing?" Jace Rimmer's voice exploded through the barn like a shotgun. He stomped toward them, boots striking the ground with fury. Revenant snorted and jerked back, startled by the noise. The moment shattered in an instant. Wyatt spun his chair around to face him, his jaw tightening. Eli instinctively moved between Jace and Wyatt, holding out a hand. "We weren't doing anything wrong." Jace shoved him aside. "Get out of my way, boy." Wyatt's voice was calm, controlled. "He wasn't hurting anyone." "You think this is some kind of petting zoo?" Jace roared, his face red with rage. "This bull is dangerous. You mess around with him, he's gonna gore someone, and I ain't cleaning up the mess." "He's not dangerous," Wyatt said. "He's scared." Jace sneered. "You can't even walk, and you think you're gonna do what grown men can't." "I'm not trying to ride him," Wyatt replied, his voice cold and steady. "I'm trying to reach him." For a moment Jace didn't say anything. His lip curled, and he let out a sharp breath before turning and storming out of the barn, muttering to himself about foolish kids. His voice echoed into the darkness, followed by the slam of a gate. Eli helped steady Wyatt as they watched him leave. "He's gonna tell everyone," Eli said nervously. "They'll think you've lost it." Wyatt stared back toward Revenant's pen. The bull had returned to the far corner, but his eyes still flicked occasionally toward them. "Let them talk," Wyatt said. "I'm not doing this for them." In the days that followed, Wyatt kept coming back to the rodeo grounds. He told his father he was just watching, but truthfully, he spent every minute learning. He studied Revenant's gait, his restlessness, the way his ears flicked at certain sounds, the way his breathing changed when someone approached. He noticed the difference in how the bull responded to silence versus shouting, to steady motion versus sudden jerks. Eli became his arms and legs, moving where Wyatt couldn't go, recording videos on an old handheld camera, replaying them together in the evenings. They started sneaking into the barn each night, speaking softly through the slats of the pen, slowly building a routine. No force, no pressure, just presence. But the gossip began to spread. Jace made sure of that. He spun the story in the locker room, calling Wyatt the wheelchair whisperer with a mocking laugh, warning the staff that if the kid got hurt, it would be their heads on the line. Some of the younger cowboys laughed along. Others kept their distance. Only one man didn't laugh, Mason Calder. He'd once been the pride of Crow Ridge, a rodeo champion who rode clean and walked away from every fall. Now, in his late 50s, Mason kept to himself, watching from the sidelines with a quiet air of authority. He'd seen every kind of rider. He recognized something different in Wyatt. One morning, as Wyatt and Eli sat reviewing notes near the stables, Mason approached with a slow, steady gait. He wore a faded brown hat and a heavy jacket, and his voice was low, almost gravelly. "You're doing it wrong," Mason said. Wyatt looked up, surprised. "Excuse me? You're treating that bull like a person. He's not." Mason crouched beside him, pulling out a worn leather journal and flipping through pages covered in scribbled diagrams and notes. "He's more than that. He's an echo of every hand that hurt him, every whip, every panic gate, every lie." Wyatt stared at the pages. The drawings weren't just of bulls, they were of breathing patterns, of posture, of emotional cues. "You studied them like they were teachers." "They are," Mason replied, "but only if you're willing to listen." He handed Wyatt the journal. "This helped me understand animals I never could break, but it also showed me maybe some things aren't meant to be broken." Wyatt turned the book over in his hands. "I'm not trying to tame him. I just want him to trust." Mason's eyes softened. "Then you're already doing better than most." That night they began a new approach. Wyatt and Eli followed the book's suggestions, breathing techniques, tone matching, and establishing a rhythm. They experimented with pitch-based cues, and Wyatt designed a small whistle with adjustable tones using spare parts from Eli's toolbox. When he blew it softly at a certain frequency, Revenant would pause, ears twitching. It took nights of patience. More than once, Revenant flinched or backed away, but they persisted, never pushing, never rushing. Slowly, the bull began responding. Then, it happened. Wyatt raised his hand again through the gate. Revenant approached, snorted once, and pressed his massive muzzle into Wyatt's palm. He didn't just allow it, he sought it. Eli grinned, eyes wide. "He trusts you. He finally trusts you." Wyatt exhaled, overwhelmed, fingers gently stroking the bull's face. "We're not done yet." But in the shadows, beyond the barn, Jace watched. His fists were clenched. His pride, his identity as the top cowboy in Crow Ridge, felt like it was crumbling. He had been thrown by Revenant twice. But this boy, this paralyzed boy, was doing what he couldn't. And the town would see it. That night, Jace made a call to a friend, one of the young stable boys looking to impress him. He slipped him a folded 20 and pointed toward the lock on Revenant's gate. "Loosen it tonight. Let the bull do what bulls do." The stable boy hesitated. "What if someone gets hurt?" Jace didn't blink. "He's already trained him, right? What's he got to worry about?" Hours passed. The barn was quiet. The air outside was cold and still. Inside the trailer, Wyatt sat reading through Mason's journal by lamplight, Eli asleep in the bunk above him. Then he heard it, heavy hooves on gravel, slow, steady, approaching. Wyatt moved to the door, opened it gently, and there stood Revenant, loose, unbound, free. The bull stood calmly, his eyes meeting Wyatt's, then slowly lowered his head. No panic, no chaos, just stillness. Wyatt reached out and rested his palm gently on Revenant's face. That was when he knew. It was time to show the world. That was when Wyatt knew. It was time to show the world. The crowd hushed the moment Wyatt's wheelchair rolled through the open arena gate. Dust swirled around him in the early afternoon sun, kicked up by boots and hooves alike. The Iron Hoof Rodeo's final day had drawn more spectators than ever before. Men in weathered hats, boys with faces pressed to the rails, ranchers, wranglers, and reporters shoulder to shoulder in the wooden bleachers. Everyone had come to see the same thing, Revenant, and the boy who claimed to understand him. Whispers passed from row to row as Wyatt made his way to the center. The buzz wasn't just about the bull this time. It was about what was about to happen. Flyers posted all over Crow Ridge had promised something different. A demonstration, a bond no cowboy had ever managed. At the far end of the arena, the chute gates creaked open. Two handlers guided Revenant forward with long ropes trailing from his halter, but no muzzle, no chains. The crowd leaned forward instinctively. The bull walked steadily, muscles rolling beneath his dark hide, nostrils flaring as he scanned the air. Then he saw Wyatt. The bull stopped for a second, lifted his head higher and snorted. But he didn't buck, didn't twist or lunge. Slowly, as if pulled by something beyond instinct, he stepped forward again, this time of his own will. Eli stood behind Wyatt near the arena rail, gripping the modified whistle he had helped build. His palms were sweaty. "He's calm," he whispered to no one, just loud enough for Mason to hear. Mason Calder sat on the front row with his hands folded on his cane, his hat low over his brow. He nodded without a word, eyes sharp beneath the brim. Next to him, Hank Knox stood rigid, arms crossed, jaw tight. He hadn't wanted this. He hadn't agreed to it. But Wyatt hadn't asked for permission. He'd just said, "I need to do this." At the opposite side of the arena, Jace Rimmer leaned against the metal rails, arms folded, a smirk playing at his lips. "This'll be good," he muttered to one of the younger riders beside him. "Kid thinks he's Daniel, and that's his lion." In the center of the arena, Wyatt stopped his chair exactly 10 feet from where Revenant now stood. The air grew still. Even the announcer didn't speak. No music, no commentary, just breathless anticipation. Wyatt slowly raised his hand. Revenant's ears flicked forward. A pause. Then the bull took a step, another. The crowd began murmuring in disbelief. Wyatt's voice, though soft, carried clear. "You're all right," he whispered. "It's just me." Revenant kept walking, head slightly lowered. His massive hooves pressed into the dirt with quiet thuds. The handlers had long since dropped the ropes. They stood frozen near the gate, eyes wide, ready to leap at the first sign of danger. But Revenant didn't rush. He didn't buck. He approached Wyatt with calm, measured purpose. At 3 feet away, the bull stopped. Wyatt slowly wheeled forward a few inches, raised his hand again, palm out, just like all those nights by the pen. "Good boy," he murmured. "You're safe." Revenant let out a heavy breath through his nose. Then, he lowered his massive head. Wyatt reached out and laid his hand gently on the bull's face. Gasps echoed across the arena. The moment stretched in silence. Then the stands erupted. Cheers rang out, hats thrown in the air, hoots and whistles flying in every direction. Cowboys stood in disbelief. Reporters scrambled to photograph what no one had believed could happen. But amidst the applause, one man wasn't clapping. Jace climbed over the arena rail, stomping into the dirt, eyes burning. "This ain't no show pony," he shouted, cutting through the noise. "That bull's dangerous." Wyatt turned slightly, his hand still resting on Revenant's muzzle. "Back away," Mason barked from the front row, standing now, cane in hand. Jace ignored him. He pulled a coiled whip from his belt and snapped it once in the air. The sharp crack made the crowd fall silent. Revenant jerked his head up, hooves stomping, tail lashing. But instead of charging, he did something no one expected. He turned sideways and stood between Jace and Wyatt. A collective breath was held. The handlers began to climb the fence. Eli dropped the whistle, ready to run. Revenant growled low, not an angry sound, but a warning. His massive frame stood firm like a living shield. Jace's face twisted. "See?" he shouted. "This is what happens when you coddle a killer." "Enough," Mason bellowed. "Get him out of there." Two security men sprinted into the arena. They grabbed Jace by the arms, dragging him backward as he kicked up dirt in protest. "This is a rodeo, not a petting zoo," he shouted. "You're making us all look weak." As they hauled him toward the gate, the crowd turned on him. Boos rained down. Mason stepped forward and shouted loud enough for everyone to hear, "There's no weakness in understanding. There's only power." Wyatt turned his chair to face the crowd. Revenant stood beside him, calmer now, eyes watching the last of the chaos fade. "This bull wasn't born bad," Wyatt said, his voice steady and sure. "He was just never seen for what he is." The crowd rose again, this time not just in applause, but with a sense of shared realization. Something had changed. Not just about a bull, about all of them. Later that evening, as the sun set and the arena emptied, reporters approached from all directions. Cameras rolled. Microphones extended. Wyatt kept his answers brief. He didn't speak about therapy techniques or whistles or trust cues. He only said, "Everyone wants to be seen. Even the wild ones." By morning, the story had gone beyond Crow Ridge. A headline on the front page of the Pine Valley Gazette read, "The Bull Whisperer in a Wheelchair." Another local station played a grainy video of the moment Revenant rested his head in Wyatt's palm, replayed over and over with commentary filled with disbelief and admiration. Calls came in from nearby ranches, asking if Wyatt would train their animals, help with troubled stock. Sponsors offered endorsements, some promising money, others offering equipment. But Wyatt refused them all. He didn't do it for fame. He did it for Revenant, and for every creature people had given up on. At the next rodeo committee meeting, there was a heated discussion behind closed doors. When the final vote came through, the verdict was unanimous. Revenant would never again be used for contests. He would be retired, not out of fear, but out of respect. His pen was moved to the open pasture behind the arena, where Wyatt could visit him freely. The committee even named the area the Redemption Range. As for Jace, he vanished from town not long after. An internal review was launched into his past conduct. Some whispered about improper treatment of animals during training sessions. Others said he'd been reprimanded more than once but had always hidden behind his success. This time, his pride couldn't shield him. He left Crow Ridge in silence. Back at the pasture, Revenant grazed under a tree as Wyatt sat by the fence, a sketch pad in his lap, drawing the moment the bull turned to protect him. Eli leaned on the top rail beside him. "Never thought I'd see the day?" Wyatt didn't look up from his sketch. "Neither did I." And as the sun dipped behind the ridge, painting the sky in oranges and gold, the story of the untamable bull and the boy who couldn't walk became something more than a miracle. It became a message. "This bull wasn't born bad," he said, voice steady. "He was just never seen for what he is." The low clang of hammer against steel echoed through the open air as Wyatt guided his chair across the gravel path leading to the new arena. Dust rose under his wheels as he passed a group of boys gathered under the oak trees, some on crutches, some quiet and fidgeting, some gripping rope with knuckles white from nerves. But all eyes were locked on one thing: Revenant. The great bull stood in the soft dirt of the new paddock, surrounded by calm, humming fences. His body was still powerful, his movements strong, but there was a gentleness in his stance now, a stillness that hadn't existed before. His breath came slow and steady as a boy with trembling hands stepped forward with a brush. Revenant didn't move, just waited. Wyatt stopped just a few feet away, observing the moment with a kind of quiet pride. Mason Calder stepped beside him, arms crossed, his face weathered and unreadable as always. "Kid's named Jalen," Mason said softly, nodding toward the boy. "Barely spoke a word last month. Now he won't stop talking about bulls." Wyatt smiled faintly. "He trusts something stronger than himself. That changes people." Mason grunted in agreement, but his eyes never left the boy. The sun filtered through the leaves of the trees overhead, casting flickering shadows across the arena's new wooden walls. Walls they'd built themselves, one panel at a time. The project had started with an idea scribbled in Wyatt's notebook. Second reign, not a rodeo. A reckoning. The words had come from a sleepless night weeks after the demonstration, a night filled with too many interviews, too many questions, and not enough answers. But it had planted something deep in Wyatt's heart. This belief that people, like animals, didn't need to be broken to be seen. They needed to be understood. Now, months later, that idea had grown into something real. The Second Reign program had transformed the abandoned pasture behind the arena into a new kind of place. Not for competition, but for connection. Not for pride, but for healing. Teens with paralysis, anxiety, and autism came from across counties. Some rolling in on wheelchairs, some clutching therapy files and looking terrified, others pretending they didn't care when they clearly did. And Revenant stood in the middle of it all. He had become more than just a bull. He had become a story, a symbol, a lesson. Wyatt ran his hand along the fence post, glancing down toward a group of volunteers stacking hay near the supply shed. Eli was among them, giving instructions with exaggerated hand movements and his usual animated charm. "Don't tie that rope too tight," Eli called out. "We're not building a cage, just a guide." One of the younger boys laughed. "You sound like Wyatt." Eli grinned and looked over at him. "I learned from the best." He jogged over to the fence, brushing straw off his shirt. "We got a group from the Montcliff School coming in tomorrow," he said. "Mostly nonverbal boys. Think Revenant's up for it?" Wyatt looked toward the bull, who was now letting Jalen pat his side gently, eyes half closed. "He'll be ready," he said, "as long as we are." A beat of silence passed between them. Then Eli glanced at the hand-drawn sign above the arena gates, wood-burned letters that spelled out Second Reign in bold, curved script. "Kinda crazy, huh?" Eli said. "All this because of a bull nobody believed in, and a kid nobody saw coming." Wyatt tilted his head. "He saw me first." Eli blinked. "The bull?" Wyatt nodded. "Before I raised my hand, before I even spoke to him, he looked at me like he knew, like he'd already decided I wasn't a threat. I just returned the favor." A familiar voice interrupted from behind. "You returned a whole lot more than that." They turned to see Hank Knox, stepping off a trailer with 2 buckets in hand. He was sweating through his shirt, dust on his jeans, and a small tool belt at his hip. He looked more like a ranch hand than a ranch owner these days. "I just finished the new ramp for the west side," Hank said, walking over to set the buckets down. "Gonna add rail guards next week. Can't have these kids racing each other down the slope like it's a derby." Wyatt laughed quietly. "They already do." Hank paused, resting his hands on his hips, eyes scanning the arena. "I used to think I lost my son," he said, voice gravelly. "When the accident happened, I thought we were both done. You couldn't ride, and I didn't know how to help." Wyatt looked up at him, face unreadable. "But watching you now," Hank said, voice cracking slightly, "I get it. You didn't need to walk again, Wyatt. You just needed to lead again." For a second, nobody said a word. Then Wyatt reached out, and Hank grasped his hand tightly. Later that week, Mason hosted a small workshop under the main tent. He stood at the front beside a blackboard and a saddle draped over a railing. Around him sat boys of all ages, some leaning forward in interest, others lounging with arms crossed, pretending to be bored. "Lesson 1, Mason said, tapping the board. Control ain't the goal. He glanced around, letting that hang in the air. Too many men think you gotta dominate an animal to earn respect. Truth is, you gotta meet them where they are. That's how Wyatt taught me, without ever saying so. Wyatt sat near the back, watching, a soft grin tugging at his mouth. The workshop ended with Revenant being led through the arena by two boys guiding him with gentle rope. The bull followed like an old teacher, proud and peaceful. Outside town, word of second rain spread. News vans came. One station aired a short segment titled, "The Boy Who Broke No Beasts." A regional documentary team arrived not long after, wanting to film a full feature on Revenant's journey. They asked Wyatt to narrate. He didn't agree right away. It took him weeks to say yes. But when he did, he wrote every line himself. He didn't just want a voiceover. He wanted to tell the story right. Eli helped him with the equipment, Mason helped with the historical details, and Hank, surprisingly, handled the editing software. The final shot was filmed under the massive oak tree on the north side of the pasture. Revenant stood beside Wyatt's chair, head low, tail swishing calmly. The camera zoomed in slowly, catching the moment without music, without narration, just the soft hum of wind through the leaves and the creak of old branches. Then Wyatt turned slightly to the camera, his face calm, grounded, and at peace. And with a quiet smile, he ended the film with a single line. "No one could tame the wild bull until I raised my hand."